Imagine this. You're walking down the street, minding your own business, when suddenly your shadow speaks. Yep, out of nowhere, it starts talking to you, responding to your thoughts and actions. It's not a reflection of what you do, it's like it has its own mind, personality, and maybe even a little attitude. You look down in shock as your shadow leans to the side and says, "You really should stretch more before running, don't you think?" Or maybe it has a sarcastic comment about the clothes you're wearing. What if our shadow could actually talk back to us? How would that change our daily lives, our interactions with others, and maybe even how we view the world around us? Let's dive in and explore how things would play out if our shadows suddenly became chatty. At first, the immediate reaction would be confusion and, let's be honest, a little bit of fear. Imagine going for a walk and hearing a voice that's coming from your own shadow. You'd probably freeze and look around, thinking it was some sort of prank. But no, it's your shadow and it's talking. It might start with small, harmless comments like, "You've been walking in circles for 10 minutes. Are you lost?" Or, "I think that's the 4th time you've checked your phone. Is everything okay?" At first, you'd be freaked out. No one wants their shadow commenting on their every move. But over time, you might start getting used to it. It could become a strange, somewhat comforting part of your routine. You'd begin to have conversations with your shadow about your day, your life, or even your personal thoughts. Your shadow would know everything about you, all your quirks, your habits, your fears. It'd be like a constant companion, and no matter how much you try to ignore it, it would always be there, ready to offer unsolicited advice or witty remarks. But what happens when you don't want to hear what your shadow has to say? You're having a bad day, feeling down, and all of a sudden, your shadow pipes up with, "Oh, come on, it's not that bad. You're overreacting again." The frustration would be real. Sometimes you just want to have some space, right? The last thing you need is a voice following you around, commenting on every emotional fluctuation. But could you really escape it? Can you turn your shadow off like you can with a phone? What if, no matter how hard you tried, your shadow kept talking back to you, providing unsolicited opinions on everything from your relationships to your work choices? This could become a serious mental overload for some people. A constant, unsolicited dialogue might make some people feel like they're losing their minds, while others might get frustrated with the relentless chatter. However, the real fun begins when you start having debates with your shadow. It would be like having a mini conversation with yourself, but instead of just internal thoughts, it's an actual, external voice. Imagine arguing with your shadow over something ridiculous, like whether or not pineapple belongs on pizza. "Oh, stop pretending it's a crime to put pineapple on pizza," your shadow might say, and you'd have to argue back, "No, it's gross and doesn't belong there." Over time, you might start to feel like your shadow is a kind of twisted therapist, always there to challenge your ideas, question your decisions, and remind you of things you may not want to hear. In a way, it could be kind of useful, right? Having someone to keep you in check, even if it's a little annoying. But would you ever get tired of it? Now, let's think about what happens when you're out in public and your shadow starts to talk. You're sitting in a meeting, and your shadow suddenly says, "You're not fooling anyone. They all know you didn't finish that report. How embarrassing." Or you're at a coffee shop, trying to have a quiet conversation with a friend, when your shadow starts whispering, "Really? You're still friends with them? You've been complaining about them for months." The potential for awkward situations would be off the charts. People around you might start noticing you having conversations with yourself, or worse, hearing your shadow speak. Some people might think you're insane, while others might believe you've got some sort of magical connection with your shadow. But the real question is, how would you deal with the social implications of having a shadow that always speaks its mind? Would you be forced to keep your distance from others to avoid embarrassment, or would society eventually get used to it? As time goes on, it's likely that we'd all adapt to the idea of talking shadows, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't come with challenges. We might start to see a world where people walk around constantly muttering to their shadows, trying to quiet them down or argue back. It could lead to a rise in mental health issues, with people struggling to cope with the constant dialogue from their shadows. On the flip side, there might be some unexpected benefits. People who struggle with self-confidence might find solace in the constant conversation and advice their shadows provide. On the other hand, those with a tendency to overthink might find their shadow's commentary frustrating, reminding them of every mistake they've ever made. One fascinating aspect of this new reality would be how our shadows would influence relationships. Imagine being on a date and your shadow says, "Seriously? You think they're cute? They didn't even hold the door open for you?" Or, "Are you sure you're ready for a relationship? Remember how you handled your last breakup?" It could be a great way to have a more honest, self-reflective relationship with yourself, but it could also make things really awkward. It might be difficult to maintain a relationship when your shadow has no filter, constantly chiming in with uncomfortable truths. And of course, there'd always be the issue of how much of this commentary you'd be able to share with others. If your shadow knows everything about you, are you ready to let others in on your deepest, most embarrassing secrets too? On a global scale, if everyone had talking shadows, the world might become a more introspective place. People would likely begin focusing more on their inner thoughts and personal development, as their shadow constantly forces them to confront their actions. Some might even consider their shadows as part of their spiritual journey, a manifestation of their true selves that helps them grow and evolve. Others, however, would likely find it invasive, maybe even suffocating as they try to escape the constant judgment of their own shadow. In the end, if our shadow could talk back to us, life would definitely get a lot more interesting and complicated. We'd have to learn how to live with a constant companion, someone who knows all our secrets, remembers every mistake, and has no problem sharing their opinions. Whether we'd love it or hate it, one thing's for sure, life would never be boring again. What do you think? Would you be okay with a talking shadow, or would you prefer to keep your secrets to yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more What If adventures here at What If Factory. Until next time, keep walking, but be careful what you say to your shadow.